Cold has killed almost as many people as bombs. That sounds dramatic, but it's a historical fact hiding in plain sight. During major bombing campaigns of the early 20th century, especially in World War I and World War II, freezing temperatures became a silent second enemy. Power grids failed. Gas lines were cut. Homes were shattered open to the night air. And yet millions survive brutal winters in cities under constant attack. Not because of technology, but because of improvised, almost forgotten heating methods that turned scraps, rubble, and, well, ingenuity into warmth. This is the real story of how people stayed alive when firestorms fell from the sky. Bombing didn't just destroy buildings, it erased infrastructure. One well-placed air raid could shut down an entire district's electricity and gas for weeks. Central heating vanished overnight. In cities like London, Hamburg, Warsaw and Stalingrad, winter temperatures dropped below freezing while roofs were gone and windows shattered. The danger wasn't just discomfort. Hypothermia set in fast, especially among children and the elderly. Hospitals overflowed. Firewood was scarce. Coal was rationed or unreachable. So civilians adapted fast. The methods they used weren't elegant, but they worked. One of the most effective emergency heating strategies was, well, brutally simple: shrink the living space. Families abandoned entire apartments and moved into a single interior room, often the smallest one. Bedrooms, pantries, even hallways became living quarters. Doors were sealed with blankets, rugs, or salvage fabric. Windows were blocked with boards, cardboard, or anything that could stop airflow. This created a microclimate. Body heat alone could raise the temperature noticeably. Add a candle or small flame, and the difference was dramatic. This technique wasn't theoretical. It was official advice in wartime pamphlets across Europe because it conserved heat better than any broken stove ever could. A single candle doesn't seem like much, but in a sealed space, it mattered. Civilians learned quickly that candles, oil lamps, and even homemade tallow lights produced enough radiant heat to take the edge off the cold. Multiple candles placed safely around a room could raise the temperature by several degrees. That difference meant survival. People also learned placement mattered. Candles near brick walls or stone surfaces stored heat and released it slowly. This passive heat retention turned ordinary rooms into crude thermal batteries. It wasn't comfortable, but it kept fingers from going numb and breath from frosting indoors. Here's the interesting part. Bombed buildings accidentally became heat tools. Rubble piles, especially those made of brick and masonry, would soak up the day's warmth, you know. Civilians would scavenge any intact bricks they could find, stacking them near small fires, lamps, or even candles. Once those bricks were warmed through, folks would wrap them in cloth and tuck them under their beds or place them around their feet at night. This wasn't just some old wives' tale. It was actually a common practice throughout Eastern Europe during World War II, particularly when fuel was desperately scarce. Heated bricks worked sort of like ancient hot stones, radiating a gentle warmth for hours without burning up any more precious fuel. In a city plunged into blackout, having a few warm bricks could honestly be the difference between shivering all night and getting a bit of sleep. When regular stoves were destroyed or fuel simply ran out, people had to get creative and build their own. These improvised metal stoves had all sorts of names, depending on the country, but they were usually cobbled together from whatever was on hand. Buckets, empty ammunition tins, oil drums, even bits of stovepipe scavenged from the ruins. Folks burned anything that would catch fire: broken chairs, old books, floorboards, sometimes even dried food waste. It was all about staying warm, no matter what. They were dangerous, yes. Smoke inhalation and fires were constant risks. But with careful ventilation, usually through shattered windows or makeshift flues, these stoves provided intense localized heat. Entire families would crowd around them, rotating positions to warm hands and feet. In besieged cities, these stoves became symbols of survival. Ugly, smoky, and life-saving. Heating wasn't always mechanical. Sometimes it was social. Families slept together, often fully clothed, under layers of blankets and coats. Neighbours gathered in basements or shelters, not just for safety from bombs, but, for warmth. 10 bodies in a small space generated significant heat. In air raid shelters across Britain, authorities initially worried about cold. They later realised, overcrowding solved that problem. Shelters became humid, warm and uncomfortable, but hypothermia rates dropped sharply. This wasn't accidental. Human clustering was a known survival tactic long before modern heating, and bombing conditions forced its return. Basements, cellars and underground shelters weren't just protection from explosions. They were warmer. Earth is an incredible insulator. Underground spaces stayed much closer to stable ground temperatures, far warmer than those exposed upper floors with missing walls. Civilians moved their sleeping areas below ground whenever possible, even hauling bedding and furniture down every single day. In cities like Berlin and Leningrad, underground living wasn't a last resort. It became routine. People learned pretty quickly that surviving the night meant going down, not up. Heating the body mattered just as much as heating the room. Warm food and drinks became tactical resources. Even when fuel was scarce, people prioritized boiling water. Soups, broths and hot grains provided calories and internal warmth. A hot drink before sleep could, raise core temperature enough to reduce cold stress for hours. This is why communal kitchens were, just so vital during bombings. One fire could heat dozens of people through shared meals. It was efficient, practical, and, deeply human. None of these techniques relied on electricity. None required advanced tools. They were rooted in basic physics and, honestly, human adaptability. Reduce space, block airflow, use thermal mass, share heat, prioritize calories. These principles are as relevant now as they were during the Blitz or the Eastern Front winters. Modern survival often assumes technology will save us. History proves otherwise. When systems collapse, it's the old knowledge that steps in quietly and keeps people alive. These emergency heating methods weren't heroic in the cinematic sense. There were no grand inventions or dramatic breakthroughs, just ordinary people refusing to freeze. They teach resilience, they teach humility, and they remind us that survival often comes down to understanding simple truths about heat, shelter, and the human body. If you're watching this channel, you already know that the past isn't dead. It's practical, and sometimes it's the reason people made it through the night. If this kind of forgotten survival knowledge matters to you, make sure you subscribe to Legacy of Survival. Like the video so it reaches others who care about real history. Share it with someone who thinks survival is all gadgets and gear. And stay with us, because the next forgotten technique might be the one you never knew you needed.